The hallways of St. Jude's Memorial Hospital in Chicago smelled like bleach, antiseptic, and burnt coffee. The scent of exhaustion soaked into tile and walls. It was 3 a.m., the hour doctors called the witching hour, when alarms sounded louder and death felt closer, like it was leaning just behind your shoulder, waiting for a mistake. Angela Jenkins rubbed her eyes as she walked past the trauma base. Her scrubs, once navy blue, were wrinkled and stained with iodine and dried blood from the gunshot victim she'd stabilized less than an hour earlier. She hadn't even noticed when the blood splattered onto her sleeve. She rarely did. Angela wasn't the kind of nurse who cared about appearances. Her hair was pulled into a loose, messy bun held together by a pencil she'd borrowed from the nurse's station weeks ago and never returned. She walked with a slight limp, barely noticeable but always there, a souvenir from a life she never spoke about. To most of the staff at St. Jude's, Angela was invisible. She took the extra shifts no one wanted. She cleaned vomit when housekeeping was overwhelmed. She stayed behind to hold the hands of patients who had no family, whispering to them softly as their breathing slowed. She never complained, never asked for recognition. She was competent, quiet, and forgettable. And that was exactly how she wanted it. Angela. Dr. Marcus Cole jogged toward her, a chart tucked under his arm. Marcus was young, brilliant, and perpetually exhausted, the kind of doctor who still believed medicine was about saving people, not managing budgets. "That chest tube you placed in bed 6, he said, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "It was perfect, surgical precision. I've seen attendings mess that up under pressure. You didn't even blink." Angela kept her eyes on the chart she was updating. "Lucky angle, Dr. Cole." Marcus frowned. "That wasn't luck. And last week, the pileup on I-90, you were calling orders before the chief of surgery had his gloves on." He leaned closer. "You're overqualified, Angela. Why are you hiding in a level 2 trauma center?" Angela finally looked up. Her eyes were a sharp, unsettling gray, carrying a depth of exhaustion that silenced people more often than anger ever could. "I just want to do my job, Marcus," she said quietly. "Please." Marcus sighed and stepped back. He knew better than to push. "All right, keep your secrets." He hesitated. "But heads up, the ownership transition happens today. The board's bringing in Julian Thorne." Angela's hand tightened slightly around her pen. Thorne, the venture capitalist, the man who bought hospitals, stripped them down, and rebuilt them for people who could afford marble lobbies and private suites. A man who didn't see patients, only margins. "He's looking for reasons to fire people," Marcus warned. "Don't give him one." Angela nodded and returned to her chart. Men like Julian Thorne didn't scare her. She had faced men with rifles and detonators. A man with a spreadsheet shouldn't have rattled her. At 8 a.m., the hospital atmosphere shifted. The air conditioning hummed louder. Night staff scrambled to clean the ER, wiping counters already stained again within minutes. Julian Thorne entered through the automatic doors like a king surveying conquered land. He was 45, handsome in a sharp, predatory way, wearing a bespoke Italian suit that cost more than Angela's yearly salary. 2 administrators trailed behind him, nervous and sweating, while his assistant typed furiously on a tablet. Julian didn't look at patients. He looked at floors, lighting, space. "This waiting room is unacceptable," he said coldly. "Why are there homeless people sleeping here?" "Sir," the head nurse stammered, "it's 10 degrees outside." "I don't pay you to be a charity," Julian snapped. His gaze swept the room and landed on Angela. She was kneeling on the floor, wiping up spilled apple juice. A 6-year-old girl stood beside her, sniffling, terrified of getting in trouble. Angela spoke softly, calming her, smiling in a way that made the chaos fade. Julian stopped inches from Angela's hands. "You." Angela finished wiping the floor and stood up. She was 5'5", dwarfed by his 6'2". She met his gaze calmly. "Yes, sir." "Is this what I pay you for?" Julian sneered, eyeing her stained scrubs. "You look like you slept in a dumpster. This is the face of my hospital?" "I just came off a 12-hour trauma shift," Angela said steadily. "We saved 3 lives tonight." "I don't care if you saved the Pope," Julian snapped. "Image is everything. Go home, change, and if you show up looking like this again, don't bother coming back." The ER went silent. Marcus stepped forward, but Angela lifted a hand, stopping him. "Understood," she said quietly. She grabbed her bag and walked out. In the parking lot, she sat in her battered Ford sedan, hands resting on the steering wheel. They weren't shaking from humiliation. They were shaking from adrenaline she hadn't released. She opened the glove compartment and pulled out a small, worn velvet box. Inside lay a silver star medal and a faded photograph of a burning Humvee in Kandahar. "Dead weight," Angela whispered. "If only you knew, Mr. Thorne." 2 weeks after Julian Thorne took control of St. Jude's Memorial Hospital in Chicago, the atmosphere inside the ER had curdled. What had once been chaotic but human now felt tense and brittle, like glass waiting to shatter. Cameras appeared in break rooms. Supply closets were suddenly locked. Senior nurses whispered instead of speaking freely. Angela Jenkins kept her head down. She needed the work, not for the paycheck, but for the noise. Without the constant alarms and rushing feet, the silence of her apartment became unbearable. Silence had a way of letting memories crawl back in. Mortars, screams, the smell of burning metal. In the ER, those memories stayed buried. On a rain-soaked Tuesday afternoon, the hospital went into code black. A VIP was incoming. Senator William Sterling had collapsed during a private fundraising lunch. The ambulance was already en route. Julian Thorne descended from his penthouse office like an executioner, barking orders as he walked. "Prep the presidential suite. I want Dr. Roberts down here immediately. No interns, no residents, and absolutely none of the support staff touching him." The ambulance bay doors slammed open. Paramedics rushed in, wheeling the senator between them. He was pale, drenched in sweat, clutching his chest. Julian stepped directly into the hallway, blocking traffic. "Elevator, now, penthouse suite." Angela was restocking a crash cart nearby when she glanced at the senator. Something was wrong. He wasn't just clutching his chest. He was scratching at his throat. Angela's eyes narrowed. His lips weren't blue. They were swelling. "Wait," she said sharply, stepping forward. Julian spun toward her, his face darkening. "Are you insane? Get out of the way." "He's not having a heart attack," Angela said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Look at the urticaria on his neck. Look at the swelling. This is anaphylactic shock." Julian scoffed. "Who do you think you are? You're a nurse. You change bedpans." The lead paramedic hesitated, glancing between Julian and the monitor. "Sir, his oxygen saturation is dropping. 88%. "Move him," Julian barked. Angela stepped closer. "If you take him to the elevator, he'll be dead before the doors open. He needs epinephrine and intubation now." Julian grabbed her shoulder and shoved her hard enough that she slammed into the wall. "Do not diagnose my patients." "He's not breathing," Angela shouted back. "His airway is closing." The monitor beeped faster. 85. Angela didn't think. She acted. She lunged past Julian, grabbed an epinephrine injector from the crash cart, and drove it into the senator's thigh. "Security," Julian screamed. "She stabbed him." Angela climbed onto the gurney, straddling the senator as his breathing turned into a wet, desperate rasp. "Bag him," she ordered sharply. "I need a laryngoscope, now." The paramedic froze, torn. "Touch me and he dies," Angela said, dropping her voice. It wasn't the gentle voice she used with patients. It was command, the kind that didn't ask permission. The security guards hesitated. Angela tilted the senator's head back, her hands steady despite the chaos. She visualized the airway, already swelling shut. Seconds mattered. She slid the blade into his mouth, ignoring the shouting, the flashing lights, the billionaire screaming her name. "I'm in," she said calmly. "Bag him." The chest rose. Color returned to the senator's face. Dr. Marcus Cole came running, breathless. One look at the monitor told him everything. "Anaphylaxis," he said. "Shellfish allergy. If she hadn't intubated him, he'd be dead," the paramedic finished. The room fell silent. Julian straightened his jacket, his face a mask of cold fury. "Stabilize the senator," he snapped. Then he turned to Angela. "You violated protocol. You assaulted a patient. You disobeyed a direct order." "I saved his life," Angela said, stepping down from the gurney. Her hands trembled now that the adrenaline was fading. "You're suspended," Julian said softly. "Hand over your badge. Get out of my hospital." Marcus stepped forward. "You can't do that. One more word and you join her." Angela unclipped her badge and dropped it into Julian's hand. "This isn't over," she said quietly. Julian smirked. "Oh, it is."
Angela walked out into the rain, unaware that somewhere far away, a Pentagon system had just flagged her actions and recognized a ghost who was never supposed to be found. The rain followed Angela Jenkins all the way home. It streaked down the windshield of her battered Ford sedan, blurring the city lights into long, trembling lines of color. She didn't turn on the radio. She never did. Silence was dangerous, but noise couldn't drown out everything, not this night. Julian Thorne hadn't just fired her, he had erased her. Angela parked outside her small apartment building and sat in the car for several minutes, hands resting on the steering wheel, breathing slowly until the tightness in her chest loosened. The adrenaline that had carried her through the ER was gone now, leaving behind exhaustion that sank straight into her bones. Inside her apartment, the air was stale and still. No beeping monitors, no shouting, no controlled chaos to focus on. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the echo of her own footsteps.
She set her bag down and stared at the velvet box on the dresser. 5 years ago, she had mailed one of those medals back to the Pentagon with a letter she never reread. I don't deserve this. The others stayed hidden, like something radioactive. She didn't open the box tonight. Instead, she powered on her laptop. By morning, Angela had applied to 4 hospitals and 3 urgent care clinics. Her resume was clean, too clean. No mention of combat zones, no explanation for the gaps. Just a trauma nurse with exceptional experience and an unremarkable paper trail. The first rejection came within hours. The second arrived before lunch. The others sounded promising, right up until the background check. The calls ended the same way every time. Awkward pauses, forced politeness, carefully chosen words. Unprofessional conduct, insubordination, potential threat to patient safety. Julian Thorne's fingerprints were all over it. Angela closed the laptop and leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. She had once sealed a sucking chest wound with one hand while returning fire with the other. She had dragged wounded soldiers through dust and blood and screaming metal. Now she couldn't get a job applying bandages. Her phone buzzed. Marcus. Angela, he whispered when she answered. Are you okay? It's hell here, Marcus continued quickly. Julian fired 3 more nurses today. People are terrified. He's cleaning house. I'm fine, Angela said. Don't risk your job talking to me. Marcus hesitated. There's something else. He keeps bringing up the senator, twisting it, making you sound unstable. His voice dropped. And he's planning something for the St. Jude's charity gala this Saturday. What does that have to do with me? He sent you an invitation by courier. Marcus swallowed. He wants you there. He said if you publicly apologize, he might consider lifting the block on your license. Angela felt something cold coil in her stomach. He didn't just want to fire her. He wanted to break her. I'm not going, she said flatly. Angela, Senator Sterling will be there. He doesn't know Julian fired you. He thinks Dr. Roberts saved his life. Julian's going to take credit on stage. That did it. Julian stealing credit wasn't just arrogance, it was theft, the kind that got people killed in other places, under other skies. Angela ended the call without answering. She stood and walked to the dresser, finally opening the velvet box. The silver star caught the dim light. The photograph underneath showed a burning Humvee in Kandahar, smoke twisting into the sky like a wound that never healed. She closed the lid. She had spent years avoiding ballrooms, spotlights, and applause. She belonged in triage tents and concrete hallways, not among chandeliers and champagne. But soldiers didn't retreat when the enemy dug in. They flanked. 1,500 miles away, in Arlington, Virginia, a secure Pentagon server chimed to life. General Vance Caldwell rubbed his temples as a red priority notification appeared on his screen. Anomalous medical event, Chicago. He clicked the file, scanning the procedure notes tied to the senator's collapse. The language made him frown. That wasn't civilian medicine. That was battlefield shorthand. He scrolled further, eyes narrowing at the airway technique described, a variation taught only to elite forward surgical teams operating under fire. "A cardiologist didn't do this," Vance muttered. An hour later, a still frame printed from hospital security footage slid into his hands. A woman in stained scrubs straddled a gurney, eyes locked, posture absolute. Vance's breath caught. He knew that face. "My God," he whispered. "Captain Jenkins." The red phone on his desk rang out as he lifted it. "Get me the Secretary of Defense," Vance said grimly. "The ghost is alive." And she was in trouble. The Pentagon never slept. Deep beneath Arlington, Virginia, in a windless room lit by soft white monitors and the constant hum of servers, General Vance Caldwell leaned forward in his chair. The still frame lay on his desk, fresh from the secure printer. A woman in stained scrubs, hair pulled back haphazardly, jaw set, hands steady as steel. She was straddling a gurney like it was a battlefield casualty, not a senator worth millions in influence. The way she held the laryngoscope wasn't textbook, it was instinctual, efficient, lethal in its precision. Vance hadn't seen that face in 5 years, not since Walter Reed, not since he had pinned a Distinguished Service Cross on a hospital gown and watched her stare at the metal like it weighed 100 pounds. "Captain Angela Jenkins," he murmured. Everyone in the room felt the shift. Officers stopped typing. Analysts leaned closer to their screens. When a man like Vance Caldwell spoke that name, it wasn't nostalgia, it was gravity. "She walked away," an intelligence major said quietly. "Medical discharge after the Arundel Valley ambush. Classified status, inactive. Location, unknown." Vance didn't look up. She didn't walk away, she disappeared. He stood and walked slowly, hands clasped behind his back. The report glowed on the screen behind him. Civilian hospital, Chicago, emergency intubation under extreme duress. Run the facial recognition again. Cross-reference inactive Tier 1 medical assets. The system responded instantly. Match confirmed. Captain Angela Jenkins, 101st Airborne, attached to Joint Special Operations Command. Decorations: Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Star, 3 Purple Hearts. Vance closed his eyes briefly. They had searched for her, for years. After she mailed back her medal and vanished into civilian life, there were whispers, burnout, survivor's guilt, refusal to be paraded as a symbol. Eventually, the trail went cold. Until now. "What triggered the alert?" Vance asked. "A civilian medical audit. The technique used during the senator's airway intervention is restricted. It's taught only to forward surgical teams operating in non-permissive environments." Vance exhaled sharply. "A civilian cardiologist doesn't perform battlefield intubation." The room fell silent. Then Vance straightened. "Who's the hospital owner?" "Julian Thorne, Thorne Global." Vance's jaw tightened. He recognized the name, the kind of man who bought systems and broke people. "Pull everything," he said. "Hospital ownership, employment records, security footage. I want to know why one of our most decorated trauma specialists is wearing janitor scrubs and being shoved around by rent-a-cops." An hour later, the footage played across the main screen. Angela Jenkins being grabbed. Angela Jenkins shoved into a wall. Angela Jenkins ordered out of a hospital she had just saved a life in. One of the younger officers swore under his breath. Vance didn't speak. His face had gone cold, carved from stone. "She's being targeted." "Yes, sir." "And the senator?" "He believes Dr. Roberts saved him." Vance's lips pressed into a thin line. "Then we correct the record." He walked to the red phone on the wall, the one reserved for moments that didn't ask permission. "Get me the Joint Chiefs," he said into the receiver, "and alert the Secretary of Defense." He paused, then added quieter but harder, "We have a compromised federal asset in hostile hands." In Chicago, Angela Jenkins stood alone in her apartment, staring out the city skyline through rain-streaked glass. She hadn't told Marcus she was considering the gala. She hadn't told anyone. The invitation lay unopened on the counter, heavy despite its thin cardstock. Julian Thorne wanted an audience.
He wanted her broken in public. Angela rolled her shoulders slowly, easing tension she hadn't realized was there. The instinct to prepare, to plan exits, angles, contingencies, was waking up. She hadn't worn a dress in years. She opened the closet and pushed aside plain clothes until she found the black dress at the back. Simple, tailored, bought for a fellow soldier's funeral. She ran her fingers along the fabric, expression unreadable. If Julian wanted a spectacle, he'd get one, just not the one he expected. Back in Arlington, Vance watched the final clip again, Angela's eyes locking forward as she warned security not to touch her. That voice, that tone. She never lost it, he said quietly. No, sir, the major replied. She just buried it. Vance nodded once. Then it's time to dig her out. He picked up the red phone again. Prepare a priority 1 call, he said. If Thorne makes his move at that gala, I want a direct line patched through live. Yes, sir. Vance stared at the screen one last time. Hang on, Angela, he murmured. The cavalry's coming. And in Chicago, unaware of how closely she was being watched, Angela Jenkins closed the closet door, squared her shoulders, and stepped back into the fight she never meant to rejoin. The grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton Chicago glowed with controlled opulence. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls, scattering light across polished marble floors. The air smelled of expensive perfume, aged champagne, and money that had never known fear. Chicago's elite moved in clusters, politicians, investors, donors, laughing softly, carefully, as if the walls themselves were listening. Julian Thorne thrived here. Dressed in a flawless Tom Ford tuxedo, he moved through the crowd like a predator among ornamental fish, smiling, shaking hands, accepting praise for his decisive leadership at St. Jude's Memorial Hospital. Efficiency, Julian said smoothly to a group of hedge fund managers. We cut dead weight, we focus on excellence, and look at the results. Profitability up, chaos down. They nodded, impressed. No one asked about the people he'd fired. Near the service entrance, half hidden by a decorative pillar, Angela Jenkins stood alone. She didn't own a ball gown. She wore a simple black dress, tailored but unadorned, bought years ago for a fellow soldier's funeral. No jewelry, no makeup. The faint scar near her eyebrow remained visible. Amid silk and diamonds, she looked stark, severe, and strangely out of place. Or perhaps more real than anyone else in the room. She hadn't come to beg. She hadn't come to apologize. She had come to look Senator Sterling in the eye, tell him the truth, and leave Chicago forever. Julian spotted her across the room. A slow, cruel smile crept across his face. He excused himself from the investors and walked toward her, security falling in step behind him. He stopped a foot away, deliberately invading her space. Well, well, he sneered. The janitor almost cleaned up nicely. Angela met his gaze, her eyes flat, unreadable. Where's the senator? Julian swirled the champagne in his glass. He's resting in the green room. He believes Dr. Roberts saved his life, and we're going to keep it that way. He snapped his fingers at a passing waiter. Get her a tray. The waiter hesitated, uncomfortable. Sir, do it. Julian turned back to Angela, lowering his voice. If you want to stand in this room, you'll work for it. Tonight, you're going to serve drinks, and when I take the stage, I'll explain exactly why people like you don't belong in respectable institutions. Angela didn't take the tray. You're a small man, Julian, with a very large bank account to hide behind. His smile vanished. Get her out of here, he barked to security, then paused. No, take her to the side of the stage. I want her watching when I accept the senator's gratitude. The guards grabbed Angela by the arms. She didn't resist. She knew exactly how to break their holds, exactly where to strike. But this wasn't a battlefield, and violence wasn't the objective. Timing was. They dragged her toward the stage as the music softened and the lights dimmed. Julian strode up the steps, basking in applause as if it were oxygen. "Thank you," he said, smiling benevolently. "Tonight we celebrate resilience. This week our dear friend Senator Sterling nearly lost his life, but thanks to the swift action of my leadership team and the brilliant Dr. Roberts, he's with us tonight." The crowd applauded warmly. Angela stood in the wings, held firmly, watching Julian steal valor with polished ease. Her jaw tightened. Julian continued, his tone shifting. "But crises also reveal weaknesses. We discovered individuals who disobeyed protocol and endangered lives. That element has been removed." His eyes flicked toward Angela. The message was clear. Then the phone rang. Not a polite chime, not a buzz. A harsh, insistent ring cut through the ballroom like a blade. Conversations died instantly. Julian frowned, annoyed. The phone on the podium wasn't decorative. It was a relic, a Cold War-era direct line installed for civil defense emergencies. It hadn't rung in decades. It rang again. The red light on its base began to flash. Julian hesitated, then picked it up, irritation clear in his voice. "This is a private event. Who is this?" The voice on the other end didn't sound confused. It sounded like stone grinding against stone. "This is General Vance Caldwell, Vice Chief of Staff of the United States Army, calling from the Pentagon." The room froze. Julian laughed nervously. "You're interrupting my gala, General." "Mr. Thorne," the voice continued, cold and precise, "according to Department of Defense tracking, you are currently detaining a highly sensitive U.S. military asset against her will." Julian scoffed. "There are no soldiers here, just waitstaff and donors." "Look to your stage left, the woman your security guards are holding." Julian turned. Angela hadn't moved. She simply looked back at him. "She's a fired nurse, a nobody." There was a pause on the line, one filled with something far worse than anger. "That nobody," Guard Caldwell said slowly, "is Captain Angela Jenkins." And in that moment, the power in the room shifted, silently, irrevocably. The ballroom didn't just go quiet, it hollowed out. 300 of Chicago's wealthiest, most powerful people stood frozen under crystal chandeliers, staring at the stage as if gravity itself had shifted. Julian Thorne remained motionless, the red receiver pressed to his ear like a live grenade. "Captain Angela Jenkins?" the voice repeated, slower now. He wanted it to land. "Recipient of the Distinguished Service Cross, the Silver Star, 3 Purple Hearts." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Julian's face drained of color. That's impossible," he stammered. "She's a temp nurse. She cleans floors." "She is the only Tier 1 combat trauma specialist ever permanently assigned to Joint Special Operations Command. She has saved more American lives in caves and deserts than you have dollars in your bank account." Senator Sterling stared at Angela from the stage, his mouth slightly open. Recognition dawned in his eyes, memory clicking into place. The voice, the command, the hands that never shook. "It was you," he whispered, "in the ER." Julian laughed weakly. "General, this is a misunderstanding, a personnel issue." "Listen to me very carefully, Mr. Thorne," Caldwell said. "You have 30 seconds to apologize to that officer and hand her this phone, or I will have federal marshals and a Black Hawk helicopter on the roof of this hotel within 10 minutes. Julian looked at the guards holding Angela. They had already let go. One of them, older, thick mustache, noticed the faint white scars on her hands. His posture straightened unconsciously. He stepped back. Julian walked across the stage, his steps stiff, rehearsed. He held the phone out to Angela without meeting his eyes. She took it. Her movements were calm, controlled. She lifted the receiver. "General," she said quietly. The microphone picked it up. The room heard it. Not defiance, not fear, authority. Vance Caldwell's wells softened. "It's been 5 years, Angela. We looked everywhere. I wanted quiet. I wanted to save people without gunfire. You can't forget who you are, and neither can we." The senator stepped forward, bypassing Julian entirely. "He fired you," Sterling said, his voice shaking with rage. "You fired a war hero for saving my life. You humiliated him to protect your ego." Turn to the audience. "Do you know what the Distinguished Service Cross is?" No one answered. "It's the second highest military decoration awarded by the United States Army for extreme gallantry in combat. Captain Jenkins didn't just work for this country, she bled for it." The older security guard snapped to attention. "Ma'am, former Sergeant Davis, 2nd Marine Division. It's an honor." Then another man stood, then another. Veterans throughout the room rose, saluting. Doctors, donors, civilians followed with applause that swelled into a thunderous standing ovation. Julian stood alone, small. Angela raised the phone again. "Call off the marshals, Vance. I don't want a scene." "I can't. The hospital board is on the other line." Angela handed the phone back to Julian. "It's for you." She listened. 10 seconds. His face went gray.
"They invoked the morality clause," he whispered. "They're buying me out, effective immediately." Angela stepped close, her voice low. "You were right about one thing, Julian. Image is everything." She turned away as the crowd parted for her, applause echoing like thunder behind her. For the first time in 5 years, she wasn't hiding, she was standing. The morning after the gala, Chicago felt different. Not louder, not brighter, quieter, like a city holding its breath. Angela Jenkins walked along the riverfront just after sunrise, hands tucked into the pockets of her coat. The cold air bit gently at her skin, grounding her in the present. For years, mornings had been about survival, getting through shifts unnoticed, avoiding attention, blending into corners where nobody asked questions. Today, her phone wouldn't stop vibrating. She hadn't answered a single call. Not from the hospital board, not from reporters, not even from the Pentagon. She needed this hour. Behind her, footsteps approached, measured, respectful. "Didn't think he'd sleep in after last night," Senator Sterling said, falling into step beside him. He looked tired, humbled. No entourage, no cameras. "Didn't sleep at all," Angela replied. He nodded. "Fair." They walked in silence for a moment, watching the water slide past concrete banks. "I owe you my life," Sterling said finally. "Twice, apparently." Angela stopped and turned to him. "You don't owe me anything. I did my job." "That's the thing," he said softly. "So few people do." He handed her a folded document. The board voted unanimously. Julian Thorne is permanently barred from executive roles in any federally affiliated institution. St. Jude's Memorial is under interim leadership. Angela didn't open the paper. "And you?" she asked. Sterling hesitated. "I told the truth, publicly, about who saved me, about what happened." She nodded once. That was enough. Back at her apartment, Angela finally answered the call she'd been avoiding. "Captain Jenkins," General Vance Caldwell said, "welcome back." "I never left," she replied. A pause. Then a low chuckle. "We'd like to make that official." The offer was generous, predictable, a return to uniform, a medal ceremony, interviews, a carefully framed redemption arc. Angela listened patiently. "No," she said when he finished. Silence stretched. "I'll consult, train trauma teams, teach battlefield medicine to civilians who don't even know they'll need it yet, but I won't be a symbol." Vance exhaled. "You never were." By noon, the world knew her name. Captain Angela Jenkins trended across every platform. Headlines screamed, "Janitor was war hero, Pentagon steps in, executive falls after gala scandal." Angela turned the TV off. That evening, she returned to St. Jude's, not through the service entrance, but the front doors. The staff had gathered in the lobby. Nurses, orderlies, residents. Even Dr. Roberts stood to the side, eyes downcast. The interim director stepped forward. "Captain Jenkins, we'd like to formally reinstate you." Angela raised a hand. "No titles." She scanned the room. "I didn't come back for apologies. I came back for patience." A beat. Then applause, soft at first, then building, not thunderous like the gala, honest, earned. Weeks later, the scars faded into routine. Angela took on a new role, training emergency response teams, redesigning protocols, making sure no one with steady hands was ever sidelined again because they didn't look important enough. One afternoon, she received a package, no return address. Inside was a familiar ribbon and medal, her Distinguished Service Cross, polished, repaired, a note tucked beneath it. "You earned this, but you don't owe it to anyone. V." Angela held the medal for a long moment. Then she placed it in a drawer. That night, she stood on her balcony, city lights stretching endlessly below. For the first time in years, her shoulders weren't tight, her breath came easy. She hadn't reclaimed her past, she had integrated it. Angela Jenkins, soldier, doctor, survivor, was finally home. And this time, she wasn't disappearing again.